Your mic is so low. Do you want it like that?
I'm short, so should I have it up here?
Yes, please.
You're rolling for that one too.
Please.
I literally hit my nose from all angles this week.
Please
First with the fucking barbell.
Oh, nice.
And when I was doing like push press, I fucking scraped my nose, and then now from the opposite direction with the mic.
Okay, so talk.
Hello. This is Jillian speaking.
Coming to you live. Wow, okay, that's mine.
Live from heavy breathing episode 100.
I'm like dripping. Like, of course, the only day I ever have a shirt with like my fucking tits out.
Yeah.
I'm running down fucking. Oof. It's all good.
Big oof.
We're gonna.
That's Thursday. Great.
That's Thursday. Okay, Thursday's always I feel like Thursday's always my weird day of the week. So this is apropos. It is for me.
Alright.
Okay.
Thursday is just a very easygoing day for me.
Me too. Okay, ready?
Sure.
Welcome to the Team Logo Fit Roundtable. I'm your host, Laurin Conlon. Each week we share evidence-based practices and communication-driven strategies we use with our clients and give you the tools you need to be successful for life. This week, I'm joined by Coach Jill, who is trying to ruin our new intro, which is why I just flicked her off if you're watching the video.
I'm so offended.
And cry about it to HR. Remind me, I have a really funny HR video to show you.
Fired.
So I'm with Coach Jill, and we are answering a question that was sent in about how to navigate a shared like pantry and food storage. But before we start, if I sound really out of breath, which I know that apparently I normally do.
Okay, if there's any time for me to do the intro, today probably would have been a good one.
Yo, I'm having an issue uploading Campbell's podcast that we did together because it's so long. And it's taken me like 2 days to do it, and it's still going. And I just realized as we were coming up to the room to record that it was still processing. So I was like, oh fuck, I needed to go get another SD card. But we had the room reserved, and like with the way the office worked. Anyways, so I'm running down downtown Tampa like a lunatic. And of course I'm wearing like a sports bra with like my tits hanging out today. Of course, so I'm running, and it's 1,000 degrees outside. Anyways, I got it. We're rolling, but I'm visibly sweating. My hair is a mess. Well, my hair's a mess anyway because I didn't wash it, but I'm glistening with sweat and probably sound out of breath. But fitness, yeah. I'm so in shape. I'm a fitness.
We were just talking before because I was like, oh, can we get? Well, it's fucking autocorrect, but I was like, want to get Starbucks?
Yeah, what did you call it?
Stearns. It was stupid autocorrect. Oh my god, Stearns Bucks. But when we were walking out of there, we were like, oh, just getting our steps in, so health and fitness with our caffeine midday,
I mean, we were getting our sunlight exposure,
yes.
So I definitely checked off all of my activities.
And then you got your running in, so there's your cardio.
Yeah, all good. So if you're watching the video, just please excuse my appearance. But let's read this question because this is definitely something that a lot of people struggle with, and this situation is pertaining to like family life and kids, but this could also be like in a shared living situation, or even a significant other who maybe eats very differently than you. So the question is, how can I deal with shared food pantry and storage? One common strategy people recommend to reduce mindless snacking or overeating is to not have sugaring food in the house. However, that can be extremely difficult if you live with other people, especially kids. The additional complexity is also due to the fact that I'm in a newly blended family. The kids are my husband's, so the comfort level to have open conversations is not there yet. I also don't want to limit the kids' snack options too much. I lived by myself for 10 years until I married my husband, so this is very new to me. Would love to hear about your strategies. So this is a tough one, right?
Yeah.
Because especially if you have lived on your own for so long, like you are
it's an adjustment.
Yeah, you're used to like your own space.
Yeah, your own pantry, your own setup, routine.
Everybody knows I have a lot of OCD, so I totally understand this too from a different level.
Yeah, it's like you do things one way, but now we do things.
Yeah, and especially with kids. So
yeah.
So that's the one thing that I do want to comment on. Anybody listening, you really don't want to limit or change the food too much. With kids there, just to suit your preferences, because that can of course create issues. And you always want to have a very wide variety of food available to kids, and not saying that you need to be promoting that they eat junk food, like obviously not. You want your kids to eat mostly healthy food, but if you're always like no, we're never allowed to have that.
You don't want to establish those like food rules, quote unquote, to your children like that. like that at all.
Yeah,
you know?
Sharing like your experiences as far as like, hey, this is what mom and daddy like. We're eating like
they
healthier
from,
foods.
Observing.
Yes. But being like, no, never having this here, or like, we're only having this because it's special, that can create some issues. So there's a lot of dynamics there. So I would say that for this situation in particular, this is going to be a little bit different than say somebody is, say you're with just a significant other and there's like a period of time where like the last few weeks of like some type of a preparation for something, you're like, hey, like I'm going to really need to dial in food choices. Like that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
When you have kids, it's not really a choice. So you really need to have all those foods there. So that the recommendation of just like keeping the food out of the house is not really going to be there. So the one thing I would say though, and this is, people talk about this in therapy a lot, but it's just exposure therapy, right? Mm-hmm. Being exposed to things over and over and again makes them a lot less appetizing.
Yeah.
And you know this.
And just even we can put this in the context of like eating out and making it work, or being around those like quote unquote trigger foods. The more you are in those situations, as much as they could be uncomfortable at the start, you get more and more used to just being in the same room as them and not really having them affect you as much. Like I'm at a point now where I can have like a bag of Oreos or whatever in my pantry forever until they go bad.
You're like literally like they're bad.
No, yeah, they are stale. So that can be a reality for a lot of people, whereas where they started could be, oh, I don't know how you can have that open pack of Oreos sitting around and not just like find yourself going into them and finishing the whole bag in like the next week, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be something you learn from. But the more you expose yourself to those things, because I used to live in a household with like my brother and sister, my parents, so obviously there's like different food choices there, and maybe they're not on the same lifestyle chains that I am. So that's just something where you are just repeatedly exposed to those foods, and it gets easier over time to be in the same room as them.
Yeah, I had a client recently who switched she was doing an internship, and now she's at a office where there's a lot of food, right? Like a very common situation, like there's, whether it's like the break room or just like, and even here, like this is an office and this is a co-working space, but every day at around like whatever time it is, they have, in the morning they have snacks, and in the afternoon they have snacks, which is really nice. And sometimes it's like, okay, I probably shouldn't have a snack, but I really want it. Occasionally they have drinks, which is fantastic, but usually like the morning, they'll have like some type of like pastry, or sometimes they have like Greek yogurt and like fruit.
So like have like meat sticks.
Yeah, no, they'll have like meat sticks. Like there's definitely like a very wide variety of food here. So I would say that they do a pretty good job of making it healthier options.
Like accommodating.
But a lot of offices are not like that. They're bringing in
have, like,
pastries,
Lay's,
cookies, all this junk. And I had a client who was like, I just, was very overwhelmed by everything at first. And like, just because it was all there and like so overwhelming, I just had like a bunch of cookies and I didn't even recognize that I was having it until after. Like, why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, part of it is going to be like, we need to change, how much food are you bringing to work? You don't want to be just really hungry at work, because then you see that and you're gonna be like, okay, I should have the cookies. But after a week or two, you're kind of like, all right, those same cookies are there.
They're not going anywhere, yeah.
And they're not even like if they bring in something that's like, oh my God, this is like the best bakery in town, you're like, yeah, let me have one of those. If it's like some bogus cookie that you're like, it's like
chips with Florida that you can find anywhere.
Have anytime.
So
that's kind of when you have to.
It's not really like special anymore.
Yeah. So know when to pick, pick those battles, right? Yeah. And we always try to say that for clients when they're in those situations. But overall, just in general, repeated exposure of having this food at, like, being around it will make it a lot easier. And not saying that initially it's going to be easy, but one thing that I find helps a lot of people, like if they are in that kind of like pre-overeating, snacking type mode, is we kind of find ourselves like gravitated towards the kitchen, like maybe open the fridge, maybe open the pantry. If you can physically get out of the room, that's helpful. And even if you can just do something like lightly physical, I feel like it kind of like releases that like agitation almost.
Like going on a walk or something.
Yeah,
or
like
even just getting
clean your
your
mirror. Like, there's always a mirror to be cleaned, like probably, you know what I mean?
Mine, for example.
I'm like, Jillian, clean your mirror. Like, do you have any of these thoughts and feelings? Like, no. But you know what I mean? Like, there's always something that you can go do.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I feel like there's just this like agitation that's built up in us, especially like if we've been around this food all day, and then you're like, I'm just gonna snap. Like, there is that like time where we can like sandwich our like mind in before we do that.
Yeah, it's super weird, because one thing I talk to with clients about is like sometimes just like making it less convenient for yourself to like have your hand like reaching into the chip bag, like even as silly as that sounds, like it actually, so you're not eliminating it from your household, because that's not realistic when you have kids and your husband maybe wants those foods. But if you have like a less convenient way of getting to it, that also surprisingly makes a huge difference. So rather than having like the M&M sitting on a bowl on like the side table near the TV, oh my god,
I don't care how
you will find me near the M&M bowl. But if you find yourself if you find yourself having that kind of snack bowl, like, hey, don't do that, right? Have it in like a bag sealed in the pantry or something, and then be in a different room. That kind of stuff makes a huge difference, because if you don't have the convenience factor, that's like a whole other barrier you have up between you and that negative habit.
And that's perfect, like I said, like it's still there. You're not taking it away from anybody. You can still get it out for them, depending on how young these kids are, I'm not really sure. But just making it a more convenient environment for you, having the foods that you know that you want to be eating kind of front and center, and then not having just, anytime you have like bowls of stuff out, like I don't care how much restraint that you have or how great your relationship with food is, like you're just going to pick. Everybody does that.
Yeah, literally. I remember like New Year's, we'd always have, it would be very laid back, but we'd always have like us all sitting around the table and like just bowls of like M&M's, chocolate covered raisins, whatever it is, just sitting out on the table. And
Snacks.
I'm just like, hell yes. Snacks.
And it's great.
And it's like, hey, you pick and choose when you get to, when you do that, you know. But you also have to be aware, like, oh, like this is like something that just promotes like grazing and picking and stuff.
And that's one of the things too, when people travel, like, you know, especially over summer, like when people are traveling to, you know, an event where they're sharing like a house or like a cabin or whatever, right? Like you're going somewhere where there's a lot of people. It's always notorious that there's just going to be stuff everywhere, right? Like there's always going to be snacks laying around. And every family is different with kind of how they eat and like what they pack, but like everybody knows they always have like, let me just get all these things, and you know it makes sense because it's large quantities of food for a lot of people, but it's just so easy to just keep grazing there. And it's not to say that you can't have those things, but just being mindful of them, and especially if this is not a vacation, this is like your everyday life, we want to make it like as conducive as possible. But one thing, like those are some good, you know, habits, tricks, whatever, strategies, tricks, some tricks, just tricksters over here. They're hacks, my favorite word.
Yeah.
Those are some strategies. Life hack, don't forget, have multiple SD cards on you so you don't have to run in the middle of the day.
It's just like being proactive about like pitfalls that you typically get into.
Yeah, everybody does.
And that like, you know exactly like what those are for you. Like if you hear that, if you hear us saying that right now, it's just about, okay, how can I like slip this other habit into my day to counteract my undoing, I guess. Yeah,
and a lot of people think, oh, this must be so hard, or like how do people keep up this motivation to do this all the time? It's like you are eliminating some of these extras.
Yeah.
And you're making it easier on yourself, and you set up your environment to make it as conducive as possible.
It's as attainable for you with just throwing these other other like habits in place to make it so like attainable, you know. It's that much easier. I can't speak today.
I know, it's fine. Hey.
I got to the wrong floor when I got here, and then I had to go back down to the lobby, and then I had to come back up in busted elevators, so
Jill is always lost, like pretty much.
I am the worst.
Always lost. But so those are some strategies that we would use to just make life easier for this situation and really every situation. But the other thing too that we really wanted to touch on was, you know, not having those trigger foods around, which is you know kind of how they describe this. It's actually a really poor strategy in the long term. Like in the short term, it might make it easy, and there's certainly times where like clients are struggling with like one specific thing. Like, man, if I have this, it really sets me off. Like, okay, let's eliminate that for right now.
And I've done that with clients too, but it's never for the long term. I always tell them like, hey, like this is just going to be for now while we level the playing field in a way with these habits and why you feel like you need to go all in on this jar of peanut butter for whatever reason.
Exactly.
You know?
It's always peanut butter. We always say that, but it really damn nut butters. But yeah, like, you know, for a short period of time, that might be really beneficial. But for the long term, we do want to work on, you know, our relationship with food in a place that we can have these things around, and that it's not like, you know, back to that Oreo example, like every time you buy a packet of Oreos, you eat the whole thing. It's like you might leave it in there, you know, for a very long time. It might even get stale, you know what I mean? Like to the point where like you're not even noticing it. And part of that is keeping things out of view. I know for me, if something's in view and I open the pantry or the fridge and I see it, it's like, I want this. Versus if it's kind of away and then I'm like, oh wait, where's this? Did I have that thing? And so some of it's just making it easier on yourself, but overall, the best long-term strategy is to be able to have all of these things, because you're going to be presented in life with these foods at some point.
It's unrealistic to think that you're never going to be in the same room as these things that you tend to overeat. Yeah. So if you never expose yourself or never have this thing in your house ever again, okay, you go to this function and guess what? There's Oreos on the table and you're at the table picking on them all night.
And everybody's like, wow, have you ever had Oreos before?
Have you ever had a cookie in your life?
You're like, no, I really haven't. So maybe throw those salted. Okay, so I don't buy Oreos just generally because
I haven't tried the new ones. I haven't bought them in a while.
Okay, I just don't buy stuff like that. And Danielle was like, you have to get the salted caramel Oreos. I was like, all right. There's literally like salt like in the cookie.
Yes.
You've been warned. They are really, really good. And normally I can be like, okay, I'll have a cookie or two, put it away. Those were like, wow, I like really need to get these out of the house. These are amazing. Yeah, big yikes. They're that good. But so a few other questions to ask yourself. So this is framing it two ways. First, if you're in a deficit, understand and expect hunger. Me and Karina did a podcast on hunger.
Not too long ago.
Yeah, a few weeks ago. So definitely check that out. We talk about a lot of different things between physiological and psychological hunger.
The week that we're filming this, the article actually just went up yesterday.
Yeah, so there's an article on our site as well to talk more about this if you want to read about it. But hunger is a normal part of being in a deficit. So understanding that no matter what, if you are in a deficit, this is going to feel like the situation is going to feel a lot more challenging just in general. And it doesn't mean that you have a bad relationship with food.
If you're hungry.
If you're hungry and
that's
you're
just a physiological response.
Yeah, like, oh my God, there's this thing in the, the fridge. I can't stop thinking about it. It's like, well, if we were in this deficit.
Food focus to an extent is normal when we're dieting. You're planning out your day. You're being strategic with how you map things out. And also hunger. It makes you think about, oh, I need another meal, right? Obviously, but you shouldn't fear hunger by any means. And hunger, like you said, that's just to be expected if you're dieting. It's just something you need to learn to cope with and manage, especially when you're in the house with other people and have other things in the house available. Yeah,
and again, we talked so much about it on that podcast, but just understanding, I think the big thing is just expecting it. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it takes away the hunger, but it just makes it a lot easier to manage with, because you're like, all right, this is just a part of the process. It's here.
Yeah.
I'm feeling this way. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me or that I need to act on it. It's
the more you ruminate about it, the worse it gets.
Yes. When you're like, let me have these 18 sugar-free foods and have all this
18 sugar-free jellies.
Yeah. Like the more that you focus, what kind of drinks can I get? What kind of gum? What kind of snacks? That is making hunger so much worse. You're putting so much emphasis on the hunger. Just say, no, I'm hungry. I'm going to sit with it. Cool. But then if you're not in a deficit, are you eating enough so that you're not chronically hungry, right? We need to look at that as well.
Yeah.
Is that why this is really challenging for you right now? Are you just drawn to foods in the pantry because maybe you're not fueling yourself properly?
Yeah. Are you, like you said, are you not eating enough to be at maintenance, or are you feeling like you chronically need to just undereat? And then being around those foods are making it worse.
Yeah.
And then the last point that's worth touching on is how are you approaching your diet as a whole when you aren't dieting? So do you feel like you need to restrict these specific foods that your family eats and have no problem with? And is that making it even worse being around them? So are you telling yourself, I can't have X, Y, and Z because they're good, bad, whatever it is? The approach there in itself can make a huge difference with whether or not you're able to just be around them and be fine.
Yeah, your mindset influences everything. And I find that a lot of people, when they're not, when they first either start with us or they're first starting just in general, they maybe are under eating certain days and they're overeating other days, right? And so when you're constantly under eating during the week and you're not really satiated, well, guess what's going to happen? That's going to build, and then over the weekend you're going to be like, oh, I ate pretty good all week. I'm pretty hungry, and then all the stuff that you were saying no to for a few days now is really, really magnified, and you maybe are going to eat that then. So that's just one of those things you need to say, okay, am I eating enough on a daily basis actually in order to be sufficient for my goals and for my my appetite and what I'm doing and my actual physical activity? Are you just afraid of eating too much? And then, like Jill said, are you afraid of these certain foods in particular, whether you've deemed them off limits or this type of, good, bad, whatever you've kind of put them in this box. So these are all just questions to ask yourself on top of, using these strategies. And I think that it's just always important to like check in with that, relationship with food, because these, like you said, Jill, these are always going to be present. It doesn't matter what the food is or what the context is. Obviously, it's going to be different. I'm not saying that you're going to go to dinner and there's going to be like fruit roll-ups, but well, maybe, I don't know. I guess it depends on the restaurant you're going to. But there's always going to be something that you've deemed off limits or snack worthy or like overeating worthy, whatever it is.
Yeah. And if you just try to eliminate it and avoid it, that just makes it worse. Like that's just putting a Band-Aid on something that you need to get like professional help for.
Yes. And listen, Band-Aids work for, we all know, for what, like a few days or what, like, wow, I'm trying to make an analogy with Band-Aid. And then as soon as I opened my mouth and I said that, I was like, this is not going to work.
This is not working.
What? The Band-Aid is not going to work for very long was what I was going to get. This is why I don't use analogies. I always mess something up. Jill's so pleased that I messed up sending, because I was like, we're going to have this cool intro and outro.
Hey, this was a very smooth podcast. You didn't even let me do an intro.
Until now. Until the Band-Aid analogy.
Maybe I can do the outro from now on.
No.
That's all, folks.
No.
You're welcome.
So, ready? Do you want me? Do you want to read it?
Read the outro? We have an outro now?
Yes, that's what I was telling you. Literally, we have an intro and an outro, and I was trying to sound all cool and professional with our podcast.
I'm gonna cry.
I'm taking it.
Okay.
As always, if you found value in the show, please share and subscribe to our channels. We have this on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. This helps us grow the show and educate more people in the industry and get our message out. So
a lot more of our inquiries have been saying that they're coming from the podcast too. So that's
thank
awesome.
you guys. Like, this is why we do it.
I've noticed that on a lot of them.
Yeah, a lot. We want to share, what we know and share with everybody, right? And obviously, specific coaching is going to be very different. But if we can, I look at this more as like kind of like public health education, and there's like a very big lack in quality education there. So we really appreciate you guys sharing the show, subscribing, all of that. And then if you have any other questions for us, or if you want to check out the articles or any of the previous podcasts that we've put out, or apply for coaching, you can visit our website, teamlocofit.com. So as always, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time.